All right, so Joe Rogan had on Dr. Sanjay Gupta, who is one of the most famous doctors in the world, especially throughout the entirety of the pandemic, as he has been a very pro-vaccine voice who also happens to work at CNN. And they did an entire 3-hour podcast that I recommend you guys go and actually watch the entirety of. They had a number of different good conversations in here. And I think it was interesting just from the point of view of somebody who is a pro-vaccine advocate, right? If you want to reach a broader audience, you know, the people who are still hesitant about the vaccines, who don't really want to get them, you're not going to be reaching that audience from your show on CNN, right? You would have to go on a podcast like the Joe Rogan Experience in order to get that message out to a different group of people. And so I think this was altogether a pretty good conversation, even though there was some weird delusional stuff that was going on. But I'm going to break this up into a number of different videos as I get into some of the stuff that they were talking about in this podcast, because again, it was really interesting. But in this clip, I want to show you guys this back and forth that they had about CNN's coverage of Joe Rogan when he got COVID and the entire cocktail of medicines that he decided to take. If you guys remember, he took the monoclonal antibodies, he took ivermectin was one of the ones that he took, and he basically took issue with CNN calling this a horse deworming drug, and he had some thoughts that he wanted to share, basically confronting Dr. Sanjay Gupta. So I want to watch this clip with you guys and then give you my thoughts on it.
You're better. I'm
Thank
glad
you.
it only lasted a day.
You're probably the only one at CNN that's glad.
No. We're not.
The rest of them are all lying about me taking horse medication. And we should talk about that.
That bothered you.
It should bother you, too. They're lying at your network about people taking human drugs versus drugs for veterinary.
Calling it a horse dewormer is not a flattering thing. I get that.
It's a lie. It's a lie on a news network, and it's a lie that's a willing. That's a lie that they're conscious of. It's not a mistake.
Yeah.
They're unfavorably framing it as veterinary medicine.
Well, the FDA put this thing out. You saw that. Did you see that thing that the FDA put out?
What did the FDA put out?
It was a tweet, and it was snarky. I admit it. They said, "You are not a horse. You are not a cow. Stop taking this stuff," or something like that.
Why would you say that when you're talking about a drug that's been given out to billions and billions of people, a drug that was responsible for one of the inventors of it making
Nobel Prize.
winning the Nobel Prize in 2015?
Yeah.
Yeah, a drug that has been shown to stop viral replication in vitro. You know that, right? Why would they lie and say that's horse dewormer? I can afford people medicine, motherfucker. This is ridiculous. It's just a lie.
I don't think anyone is.
But don't you think that a lie like that is dangerous on a news network when you know that they know they're lying? You know that they know that I took medicine. Like, here it is. This is ivermectin.
You got
this
it with
is right
you.
here. Somebody gave it to me.
All right, hang on. The thing is, we're like going so fast. Like I feel like I'm missing.
Do you think that's a problem, that your news network lies?
Well, I don't.
Dude,
what did they say?
They lied
What did
and
they
said
say?
I was taking horse dewormer. First of all, it was prescribed to me by a doctor.
Yeah.
Along
They
with
shouldn't have said
a
it was
bunch of other medications.
If you got a human pill, because there were people that were taking it, the veterinary medication, and you're not, obviously. You got it from a doctor, so that it shouldn't be called that. Ivermectin can be a very effective medication for parasitic disease. And as you say, it's probably, I think what, 250 million people have taken it around the world?
More,
I get that.
Way more.
So
way more. Billions of people have taken it.
Can I just come back to the one I want to talk about?
No.
Two things on the ledger.
Before we get to that, does it bother you that the news network you work for out and out lied, just outright lied about me taking horse dewormer?
They shouldn't have said that.
Why did they do that?
I don't know.
You didn't ask? You didn't think that was you're the medical guy over there.
I didn't ask. I should have asked before
coming on
your
podcast. But they did it with such glee.
No,
yes,
Joe.
they did. I watched.
You watched?
I watched.
You watched? No, I don't think there's
yes,
glee.
They did.
No one takes.
Joe Rogan says he has COVID, taking livestock drug despite warnings. Yeah.
Jamie had to pull this up.
You want to play it?
Does she
This
have
is
glee?
your news network.
I'm gonna watch.
Let's see.
I'm gonna watch.
All right, so they then proceeded to basically play a couple of these CNN clips where they were literally saying, Joe Rogan is taking livestock medicine. Okay, so there's a good bit of nuance here, right, that has to be discussed. Is it a lie to say that Joe Rogan was taking horse deworming medication? Yes, that is a lie, because as we just showed in this entire clip, right, Joe Rogan was taking the human version of ivermectin, right? There is livestock use, and it's used to treat parasitic infections, just like it is used to treat parasitic infections in human beings. So it's technically a lie to say that Joe Rogan was using horse deworming medication, because he was using the human version that was, again, prescribed by a doctor, as he was just pointing out there. Now, in a sort of a more nuanced and broader picture, it's also extremely dishonest and misleading misleading for Joe Rogan, as he did in that video that I even covered on this channel a while back when he had COVID. It's extremely misleading and honestly somewhat dangerous for some guy who has a platform like Joe Rogan to be going out there and saying, oh, you know, I took all of these treatments, they made me feel significantly better when I had COVID. I took the monoclonal antibodies and I took zinc and all of these other things, and I took ivermectin. That is also dangerous and misleading, and it's a lie to say that ivermectin, that there is sufficient evidence to conclude that ivermectin can be used to treat COVID. That is also just as misleading as CNN going out there and saying Joe Rogan is taking horse deworming medication, okay? So I think there's a good bit of nuance to be had in this entire conversation, right? Yes, CNN is lying, and yes, Joe Rogan is 100% correct in saying that lies like this are what feed into basically people rightfully being able to call networks like CNN fake news, is they look at something like this and they say, and this is exactly what Joe Rogan was trying to say, is, you know, if you're going to lie about something as stupid and silly about this technicality on whether or not I'm taking horse deworming medication or I'm taking a human medication that is not supposed to be used for COVID, right? If you're willing to lie about something that stupid and silly about some idiot comedian podcast host, right, then what are people supposed to believe in terms of what you're talking about on all of these other more substantive stories, right? How are they supposed to trust you on covering things like foreign policy, covering Syria, covering, and he gives a bunch of other examples that he listed there. So in terms of like a broader picture, right, is Joe Rogan correct to say that CNN is a network that lies all the fucking time? Yes, of course they do. They lie all the time about a million different things. I would think that, saying that Joe Rogan took horse deworming medication is very, 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 very low on the list of importance about the lies that CNN has told over the last number of decades, right? This is a network that was fervently supporting the Iraq war and helped to promote a number of other lies that had much heavier consequences than saying this about Joe Rogan. But, you know, he's not wrong to say that they did lie about him, okay? They did lie about him. And again, it's also a lie for Joe Rogan to turn around and keep promoting ivermectin as if it is a legitimate medication for COVID-19, okay? The company, Merck, that produces ivermectin themselves have said there is no sufficient data to prove that this should be used for COVID. Don't use it for COVID. So if the FDA, if all of these scientific experts, including the company themselves, who have a direct financial incentive to sell this, to market basically ivermectin as a COVID cure, if it was a COVID cure, the company that makes it would at least be trying to promote it as a COVID cure, and they're not. They're telling you don't take this. So it's also dishonest, you know, to say that like nobody was taking the horse deworming drug. There were a lot of fucking people who were taking the horse deworming drug, and they were literally ending up in the hospital ODing on these ridiculous horse quantities of ivermectin. So there's a good bit of nuance to have in this entire conversation. But again, I'm probably going to be doing a number of clips from this podcast because I think it was pretty interesting. They had a number of good conversations. But again, good bit of nuance to be had in this conversation. Both CNN is lying, and I think that Joe Rogan is still on the subject of ivermectin being extremely misleading.